As Mr. Sandy mentioned, we have a very distinguished panel this evening, and we're delighted that they could join us. This is going to get really annoying.
Keep it low, that's fine.
I think it's like the universal problem. You can have the best hotel, the best food, the best speakers, but the microphone always gets messed up. I don't get it. If anyone can figure out microphones, be a very wealthy person. Okay, so wanted to have our speakers, I want to introduce our speakers, tell you a little bit about them, and have them come up today. First off, I'm going to introduce someone who should be no stranger to us. But before I do that, let me also mention that on your table you'll find little slips of paper for questions in order to ensure that the Q&A session goes smoothly and efficiently. We'd like to take all the questions in a written form, and we'll have volunteers walking around the room, picking those up and handing them to an OMA rep, who will then forward it to me to ask the question. So Mr. Michael Wolfe is the author of books of poetry, fiction, travel, and history, including 1,000 Roads to Mecca and the Hajj. He also produced a very memorable show that I'm sure many of us saw on Hajj, from Mecca for Nightline on ABC in 1997. There are a number of other books and movies that he has produced and helped create, and you can read about those in the program. But want to let you know about a couple of projects that he's currently working on. One is, there is a project that you can go to if you go to facebook.com/myfellowamericanproject. And what it is it's to encourage non-Muslim friends to give a 30-second vignette or relationship of Muslims that they know. So, for example, if someone were to, say, hey, my daughter's elementary school teacher is Muslim, and here are my observations about that person. So it's just trying to put a human face on Muslims that we may know. So I think it's a wonderful project, and it's that type of outreach that I think is going to be very effective, because often what we've found is that you have stereotypes and erroneous misconceptions about people when there is ignorance. And when you can humanize the issue and you can hear it from somebody that you know or trust, that tends to dispel a great deal of those myths. So I think that's a wonderful project, and I would urge everyone to go, once again, facebook.com/myfellowamericanproject. A couple other documentaries that Mr. Wolfe is working on is, one is Treasures of Islam, which is about Islamic civilization art, and that you can expect to see in winter 2011 and perhaps early 2012. And the second one is a story, a World War story regarding saving fugitives from the Germans through the help of the Paris Mosque, which I think is a fascinating story, and I for one, it was the first time I heard of that, so I'm very much looking forward to hearing all about, to seeing that documentary and hearing more about that. Without further ado, I welcome to the stage Mr. Michael Wolfe. Again with the tall thing, I don't get this. Just like that, huh? Okay. Thought we would introduce everyone, bring them up. No. Assalamu alaikum. Okay. It's never been simple or trouble-free to be a Muslim in America. What we're calling Islamophobia today is really nothing new. I'm sure most of you can attest to that. But a person would have to be tone deaf not to know that in the last year, some sort of rhetoric that was previously extreme is now trying to get itself normalized in our media. This new push to normalize an extreme rhetoric probably began, to my knowledge, sort of pre-9/11 in the past year, around the so-called Ground Zero mosque controversy.
And it continued with the business in Murfreesboro, Tennessee, and in parts of California and elsewhere around the country, and later with all kinds of rather unpleasant demonstrations around the country that try to tie Islam with not being American. That seems to be the undercurrent of all of this business that we're watching. A year ago, we saw a very different kind of racial argument being made that was focused on the Latino community in Arizona, but also had a lot of resonance around the country in various communities. In each case, this has had to do with waving the flag and coordinating a voter base around an immigration question. This is a voter base that many politicians are stooping to appeal to now. A recent Gallup poll has shown that those who embrace Islamophobia are also, by and large, anti-Semitic. So it's a mentality. It's a base that can't get adjusted to contemporary society. It's a base of insular thinking people who feel threatened by globalism and by the 20th century and the 21st century as well. People who claim that they want Islam excluded from American society cite passages from the Quran that advocate violence. They try to make people think that because one line of the Quran says this, that all Muslims are therefore compelled to believe that and to act upon it without exception. So the equivalent of that would be to claim that Jews stone disobedient sons to death because it says they ought to in the book of Deuteronomy, or that Christians should slay all non-Christians because it says they must do that in the book of Luke. Or these same people hold Muslims responsible for acts of terrorism or of jihadists 10,000 miles away. They say, look what they do in Waziristan. They're the same all over. These are the two ways in which this kind of rhetoric plays on a largely uninformed and almost unsuspecting public to get votes. For us, our weakest links in this kind of argument are the few confused young would-be jihadists who are in our midst occasionally. They pop up in newspapers and then we know they're there. And these are people to whom I think we need to speak more plainly than we have as a community. The best allegiance and the best solidarity that we can express in this community is allegiance and solidarity to our principles. Not to any individual, not even to our community per se, but to the principles of our community. So these harebrained, violent acts, this behavior that's exhibited here from time to time, it has no place in our community. It has no place whatsoever. Nor, obviously, is it limited to our community. Every group has this, including the very people who would like to stigmatize Muslims and Islam, as we saw with the recent shooting in Arizona of an elected representative. It had nothing to do with Islam. It had more to do with the people who are now barking about Islam. So this is not a phenomenon that is exclusive to anybody. And we need to recognize that ourselves in our own community. Now we have several politicians around the country who are currently conflating Sharia with terrorism. Bills are up for vote in several state houses to, as they say, ban Sharia. As if Sharia, rather than being a reference point for Muslims' personal behavior, were some sort of body of foreign law that was seeking to somehow impose itself on a pluralistic society. It's a ridiculous argument. In Arizona,